Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds Podcast, the show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, licensed fishing guide, and your host. I'm super happy to be here. With me today, I have the one, the only, the Canadian Andrew Lewin, host, founder, self-proclaimed oceanpreneur, owner of Speak Up for Blue podcast, the podcast designed to show you how to live for a better ocean. Andrew, welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I think this is like my third time on the podcast. I'm becoming a regular, I feel.
Well, whenever I get stuck, I know, if I try to think about what's the one person I can call to talk about any topic for an hour?
Yeah.
It's you. So.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah. So you're my person on that in that front. And I was actually when I set this whole thing up, I was feeling what I call podcast depression.
Yeah.
This is our 197th episode, man.
That is so close to 200.
I know you're an old hat. You're 500 off, something crazy like that.
I'm approaching. I'm still 40 off from 500. Yeah.
Well, 3 shows a week get you there fast.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. But you get there and you're like, oh my God, I'm almost at 200 and I'm broke. How am I not rich from podcasting yet? So,
they sold you the wrong dream. They sold us all the wrong dream.
I know. Podcasting is not the get rich quick scheme. It is the get poor slow scheme. What's $40 a month? Anyway, welcome to the show. Tonight on the show, we're going to answer the age-old question: is catch and releasing fish cruel and unusual punishment? Is that horrible for the fish? Should we just catch and kill them and just let them go of all that pressure? We're also going to talk about ocean conservation because, Andrew, you're here. We have some news and, of course, much, much more. So we have a lot going on tonight, and we're going to get to it all right after a word from our sponsors because we do want to make a little bit of money on this show. And actually, my first sponsor doesn't pay me because it is me. This episode is brought to you by me, the Fish Nerds Guide Service. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about guide services in Louisiana tonight, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, that's right. Fish Nerds Guide Service. We're here to bring you and your family on a guided fishing trip on a state-of-the-art, brand-new pontoon boat. That's right. I said pontoon boat. This is a comfortable but serious fishing machine with control for lake trout, salmon, cast for bass. We'll cruise into a cove and put the hurt on some perch and bass and panfish. Head to fishnerds.com for rates or give me a call at 603-986-4335. We're in Mount Washington Valley, New Hampshire. One of the best places to visit in the whole United States. And we're the only guide service in the area that can bring your whole family fishing. If you don't fish, we can take you out on a guided cruise. And we just partnered with the local conservation commission, Tin Mountain Conservation, to offer guided nature cruises. So that's coming up all summer long. And all those cruises, a portion of most of the funds would go to funding conservation projects through Tin Mountain. So we're doing that. We get publicity and boat rides and learn about nature. It's been great. Also, we're brought to you by Thirst Productions, which is a one-man digital media agency catering to small businesses by helping them improve their online presence. From website and search engine optimization, SEO, social media and targeted advertising, website analytics, and website maintenance, Rich helps businesses speak to customers more efficiently. Thirst Production also gives back to cold water fishery conservation projects by working with select nonprofits at deeply reduced rates to help them better share their message. So if you're a small business and need a digital facelift, or you work with a nonprofit in need of a new online presence, get in touch with Rich at thirstproductions.com. Thirstproductions.com. And if you want to give us your money and advertise with the Fish Nerds, I'll give you a great deal. Just email Clay at fishnerds.com and just make sure you're not selling garbage, and we will sell your stuff on our show.
Especially garbage for the ocean.
That's right. Yeah. If you're a plastic straw company, get the hell off.
Get out.
Get out.
Bags or
yeah. Hi, I'm a single-use plastic company.
Be like, no, thank you.
Yeah,
we're poor, but we're not that desperate.
I sell grocery bags. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Hey, so
I'll tell you, that's a business, is to sell reusable bags to companies, sell reusable plastic straws, like the metal ones that you drink, to companies and to restaurants.
We use paper straws at home, and I was telling you off air, my metal straw. I have a stainless steel iced coffee mug with a screw-on lid and a metal straw in it, and it's having a second birthday this week. It's turning 2. And so one straw, 2 years old, and tonight it just bent. It just broke. So I need to spend $1.49 on a new one. So it's economical.
Yeah.
And it's good for the environment. And it's just a piece of metal. So it'll just, I'll throw it on the ground and some kid will step on it and get lockjaw. But other than that, good for the environment.
As long as they don't get electrocuted, you're fine.
That's right. No big deal.
Okay. Well, can I just say something before we start?
Sure.
About plastic. So there's a story going around. It's been annoying me. I keep seeing it. There's a story going around about this ocean cleanup project that this kid in high school designed this apparatus, this large apparatus that's apparently going to clean all of the plastics out of the ocean.
I saw this thing.
Yeah, you've probably seen it. If anybody on Facebook has probably seen this, it's made the rounds. Now, this project has been highly criticized by scientists, by marine debris and plastic scientists.
You know what? Screw those guys.
Yeah, how dare they?
They went to college.
But for some reason, media outlets aren't taking those criticisms and putting in the stories. They're just saying, hey, this is a really good news story. This high school kid, or he's now not in high school, this high school kid has come up with this engineering project, and he's going to clean all the oceans. The problem is that, one, it doesn't work. This is the third round, and it hasn't worked yet. And the only thing that has done is because it has nets within the first 3 meters of the ocean, it's actually probably taken animals and got them all caught up in the net. So it's probably killed more animals than plastic pollution in that little area. Now they're releasing it into the Pacific garbage patch, and media outlets are like gobbling this up without any criticism. It's ridiculous.
It's really hard because the media just wants that sense. They didn't want to dig deep, right? They want that.
They want a good news story.
Yeah, and it sounds great, and of course, everyone wants to think when they had their straws or their plastic bags that they're not hurting anything.
Right.
And of course, it's fine. Now they've got a machine cleaning up our crap, so who cares? But then, what happens? They clean all that crap up, they bring it to a landfill and dump it again, and it gets back to the ocean. What are you doing?
Well, the thing is, too, let's be honest here. Plastic pollution is an epidemic. It is not just in one spot where it's like big pieces. This is like a soup that's in the ocean. It's everywhere in the ocean. It concentrates in these gyre systems, but it's everywhere in the ocean. So forget cleaning it up. Let's prevent it from going in. And the problem is this media attention is taking away from the efforts of people who are trying to stop things from getting in.
Well, have you heard about? I've heard about a genetically modified caterpillar that can eat plastics, and you keep hearing about these little kind of things.
Yeah.
And people are putting all this hope in it. It's like planning on going to Mars when we wreck our planet. It's not realistic. It's not
put in
a real solution.
Let's make an animal in a lab and let's throw it into the ocean and let's see how we do. Right? How does that sound? Does that sound good?
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah, it's like, let's take Alien and let's try and get rid of Predator by bringing the aliens in and see how that goes. That's how it seems. Right?
Well, historically, putting animals in environments they don't belong in has always been good.
Yeah, of course.
Always turned out perfectly.
Good. So good. We always win on that case, right?
Yeah, I can't think of one example.
Not one
that hasn't turned out perfectly every time.
Ask the fish farms out. Ask the people who love fish farms out in salmon country in BC. They love fish farms out there.
I hear they're shutting them all down. Is that true?
They're trying. Yeah. They're trying. It's because of there's this major disease that's been discovered in the pens that are getting out into the ocean and affecting the coho salmon. And of course, those populations are going up and down. Plus, you have invasive species that they get released by accident that goes in. But there's such a focus on the economy there, and they're good for the economy apparently. And so it's a big battle. I think in the long run they'll get shut down and they'll be put all, instead of being an open pen, just put it all into one big building.
Yeah, inland pens almost make sense. They have them in the ocean. And that's where the whole thing. Funny, kind of just this is way off what we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
but
sorry about.
I was in a fly fishing shop the other day, and a guy walks in, and in New Hampshire, we only have one native river trout, which is the brook trout, right?
Okay.
And a guy comes in. I said, "What are you fishing for?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm catching brown trout, wild brown trout." I said, "So they're invasive?" No, they're naturalized natives.
Oh, I love that.
And I said, "What's that mean?" He goes, "Well, they've been here long enough, and they're valuable to the ecosystem, and so they're naturalized. They're natives." And I said, "Okay, so largemouth bass, they've been here since 1884.
Yeah.
How do you like those guys?" "Oh, I hate those invasive species." Okay. How about carp? Same thing. How about I'm like this list of fish. So why are brown trout special?
Yeah.
Well, they're because they're trout and he fly fishes. So that's it.
I see an analogy to human beings in different cultures, right?
Sure.
Right there. Can you imagine the First Nations coming over, then we come over oh no, we're introduced, but we're naturalized.
Right. I've been here 3 generations.
I've been here
Therefore,
3 generations.
I'm a native.
Right.
That's what we're saying. You're like, oh, they've been here for 4 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. All right. So they had babies, therefore they're natives.
They're natives. Yeah. Exactly. That's how it works.
Yeah, but
sarcastic here, people. Just to let you know, it's just if you don't get it, we're being very sarcastic.
Yeah. So, but the guy I was talking to could not connect with my point.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think that if they're reproducing in the rivers, which our rivers up here have almost nothing in them, they're just cold water rivers with very little fish, very few native fishes. And I think if they're reproducing, that's a problem for the native brook trout.
Yes.
And all the trout communities don't agree with me.
Yeah.
They disagree. And I'm like, well, I don't see a difference between those guys and the bass. I mean, it's along here, they're reproducing here, and they're also eating other fish. So,
well, and brookies are sensitive too, aren't they? They're pretty sensitive species.
I don't know. I mean, 8 states have them as their state fish, including New Jersey. If they can make it in New Jersey, they can make it anywhere.
So true. So we have them here in Ontario, but we're very careful with them because if you see them, basically, I guess if you see them, it's a very healthy system. The water quality is very healthy because
but they're known for living in clean water, whereas
clean, cold water.
Yeah, like rainbow trout can handle some pretty murky stuff.
Right.
Atlantic salmon can live in some murky waters. Right. Brown trout, they're native to Germany.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about rivers in Germany, but I think they're pretty powerful fish.
Yeah, I would imagine,
and it can handle some stuff. But but brook trout are a char, just like a char, and just like a lake trout. And those guys are all very sensitive fish.
Yes,
and so we should be looking out for them. And I think brown trout reproducing where they don't belong.
Not good.
I don't.
It doesn't help. It just doesn't help, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have a weird feeling about this whole thing about fish, and look, they've been here for a long time. Do we, with invasive species in general, do we go after them, or do we step back and see if things balance a little bit? Because you can't win a lot of these fights.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Stopped.
Well, that's the thing, right? You get. I mean, think about how Asian carp came over. Asian carp came over because people in Mississippi wanted to get algae off their aquaculture nets, and Asian carp eat everything. So, let's bring those over because nothing bad will happen.
Nothing ever bad happens. Yeah.
No, and let's bring those over. And then after a while, then people are like, well, now we have them everywhere. So what are we going to do?
Now you make YouTube videos. You drive your boat down the river and watch them jump out of the water and smack you in the face. It's a whole industry.
Yeah, and it is. And people like to catch them because they're big, right? They may not love to eat them, but they love to catch them because they're a fight. Are they not?
I've never caught one, but any big fish is fun to catch.
Right, it's fun to catch. But then you got here in Canada, we're spending $20 million over 3 years to keep them out of the Great Lakes because we know they're going to just change our entire system, right? So it's a very ethical sort of concept that goes back and forth, is because we do have a lot of naturalized species in freshwaters in North America. I mean,
we do.
We have it, and so after a while, people are just like, well, it's naturalized. We're never going to get rid of them, and now they're part of the system. And if we take them out, the system will change again. And then you have new invasives that are coming in constantly, and you're trying to control for them. So it's like, what do we? Where's the line after a while?
Maybe there's not one.
Maybe there's not one. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't help. It just doesn't help, right?
Maybe there's not one. 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 Maybe there's not
Maybe there's not. Yeah, exactly. I think it just depends on how they're managed, how they're perceived by the public, and how the government will actually manage that based on that perception.
Yeah, and the government always gets it right also. Always.
Because they think long term.
Always,
right?
Yeah.
They're long-term thinkers.
All right. Guys. Yeah. So we're going to move on here. The question we're asking today, and I put this up on Facebook the other day.
Yeah.
And I asked, is catching and releasing a fish mean, right? The title of the article we're based this on, the title is actually Catch and Release Fishing, Cruel and Unusual Punishment, ? By John Chandlemeyer from Alaska Outdoors. This was actually published in 2016, so it's a few years old. Mm-hmm. I've seen it before, but I like to share it every once in a while because it gets people talking about catch and release. And this is important to talk about because a lot of like hardcore fishers will say, I never keep a fish ever. I always catch and release. This is kind of contrary to that. And it starts off, I'm going to read it, part of it. I'm a fisherman. I've been chasing fish since I could first carry an old bait casting rig. One of my first fishing memories is landing a silver salmon near the mouth of Peters Creek. I hooked him and just started backing up until the fish came flopping on the bank. I'm not going to say I played that salmon. Popular author John McPhee would come unglued to hear that word. There's no play in catching a fish. McPhee writes, you are at best torturing and at worst killing a creature you may or may not eat. Playing at one end, dying at the other. If playing is what that is, it's sadism. So that's kind of where we're going here. And the author goes on and says that what he does is he goes out and he catches and eats the fish, right? Not for fun, but for the intent to catch and eat. Catch and release is a confusing concept because it concerns only the intent of the fisherman to be fishing for food and letting a 12-inch lake trout go because it's too small, or gently unhooking a 20-pound female so she can produce thousands of fry is not the same as angling with no intent to keep the fish for food. Releasing a fish too small or too large is selective harvest. So that's where he's going. He's like, you should catch fish if you're going to eat them.
Yeah.
So it goes on for a long time, and I'll put a link up at fishnerds.com. So he goes on and on about how it's basically torture to catch a fish and let it go. And so on the poll on Facebook, most people said it's not torture to catch and release a fish. And I think you were in that nope group, right?
Yeah, you know what? I had to think about it though for a while.
Yeah,
because it's interesting, and I've seen these articles. Now, I'm not an expert in this at all, but there have been studies saying that fish do feel pain.
Right.
For a while, people never treated fish and say mammals that are hunted on land the same.
Right.
And of course, when you look at the difference, you look at hunting for food versus hunting for like trophy hunting, there's a very big divide in how people think.
Sure.
But when you look at catch and release, a lot of catch release, when you talk about if they're not big enough or they don't meet sort of government standards of where you can keep them, you're supposed to release them,
right?
So that they can go back in. I guess the intent is they will stay alive if you release them. Right. So you have to release them properly. So I would imagine first-time anglers like myself would not be as skilled in taking out hooks as, say, someone like yourself.
Well,
that would be able to do it. And of course, it all depends on where it's caught and everything like that, right?
Well, there's so many variables in releasing a fish safely, right? So I can give you an example. So like we caught a lake trout this winter, and the way it attacked the bait was more aggressive than normal. So it gill hooked itself. There's no reason it should have gill hooked itself. Usually it's a perfect hook in the lip, but it got hooked in the gills. It was 17 inches long. Wow. 17. Keeper size is 18. The fish was bleeding everywhere. There was so much blood that you know for sure this trout's going to die.
Yeah.
But legally, we couldn't harvest that fish. Right. So we released a dead animal back into the lake.
Right.
It wasn't dead when we were holding it, but we know for sure this thing died afterwards, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And that's one of the hard things. And the other thing is the author in this article goes on to say is like if you're hunting game and you shoot a deer and you don't kill it, but you hit it, that counts towards your bag limit. That counts as a kill. But with fish, it doesn't. if you call it or you catch and release it. In New Hampshire, for example, we have 5 trout limit, right? 5 brook trout. But if you catch and release 4 brook trout, and then you can still keep 5 after that. He would be saying those 4 should count towards your bag.
Gotcha.
And that way you're not stressing the population, killing all these things.
Just in case you kill the other 4 that you released or maim them enough where they're weaker and they can't eat or they can't feed for themselves and that, right? Now, the other way, though, to think about it is the one, say you do, the example that you said you had, it was lake trout, right? Where it was hooked and it was bleeding a lot. The other aspect from a biologist and ecologist point of view is if you put it back in and it does die, other animals are going to eat it.
Well,
so you're feeding the population of that system.
Right, but you can make that case for killing pandas too. Well, I'm just feeding the other animals.
But pandas are warm and fuzzy, Clay.
Well, have you met a brook trout? They're so cute.
I know, but they're not warm and fuzzy. They're not warm and fuzzy. And again, it goes to that perception of they're warm and cuddly and cute, and then compared to like a brook trout, which is slimy and nobody wants to touch it other than people who fish and ecologists, right? So, and I'm not saying it's right, because I do. There are some fish that are pretty cute looking. You don't want to harm them, but it is that kind of thing. But I don't know, like it's a tough situation. You have to follow the law because if not, you get dinged if they catch you.
Right.
But then it's true. It's a little bit of it's a little bit of a problem. But now let's look at another example. Let's go to saltwater, and in Florida, they've shown that researchers have shown that if you hook a hammerhead shark, it's actually easier to just cut the line. It's safer for the shark to cut the line and leave the hook in and let it rust out than it is to fight it, bring it on board, take the hook out, and release it, because the stress that it goes through with that fight could kill it.
That's true, by the way, with all fish. You're better off cutting the line.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people don't think that. So that's why they got it protected, because the stress for that hammerhead shark is so brutal that it will die after. There's a high chance that it will die after that fight.
So they're an especially sensitive fish.
Especially sensitive.
Yeah. So with Atlantic salmon in New Hampshire, if you catch one through the ice, the not the rule, but the recommend. This is one of those kind of the state recommends you cut the line without ever removing the fish from the water. Yeah. For the same reason. Yeah. They think taking it out, unhooking it is too stressful for the fishes. Yeah. So it's something to do. And whenever I read these kind of articles, first of all, it's really hard not to anthropomorphize the animal. It's really hard not to put your own emotions in there, because we're human and empathy is part of what we do. But whenever I read these things, even though I disagree with probably 90% of the assertion of this whole thing, I always, the next fish I catch, I'm just a little bit kinder to. Yeah, I'm still going to catch them.
I hear you.
But I'm just a little bit maybe more thoughtful. If I'm going to kill it, I kill it faster. If I'm going to release it, I release it faster. You know what I mean? I don't take the time to take 25 photos. It's a quick shot, let it go.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, it kind of brings you just back to, because I think we get sometimes when we do something where we're dealing with animals, and this can happen from training a dog or dealing with an animal over and over and over again, you tend to lose that sensitivity to certain things, or you start to get a little bit more experimental in terms of like taking pictures with fish, knowing that, hey, look, they're not breathing because they're out of water, so let's get them back in the water. But so getting an article like this every once in a while kind of brings you back. And I think the same thing would be maybe for like trainers at a zoo or something like that. Maybe reading an article that talks about sensitivity to animals in captivity, whether it be orcas or whether it be anything else, maybe they go back and look at it and be like, well, maybe we're not doing the right thing, or maybe I should do this as quickly as possible like I was trained to do, but I've kind of been leaving on the wayside because it's not a huge deal. But then it kind of makes me feel like I feel bad for the animal.
we need reminders. It's almost like maybe we need to do anthropomorphizing a little bit. Maybe it's not a bad thing.
It's not bad to feel something for an animal, even if you're catching it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think I don't know within like the recreational community if it's a pride thing or something like that. Catching something or trying to deal with the certain parts. I know some fishers that are just like, yeah, I just do it. If I have to kill it, I'll just bang it on the head as fast as possible to get it out and do it. Even though it's brutal, it's what I do. It's the fastest way to do it. It may look insensitive, but it's actually quite sensitive,
Right.
Or to put it back as soon as possible, I'll do it as soon as possible. It may look like I'm throwing the fish back in, but
Right. Well, and you have the two kinds of I think there's two kinds of hunters and fishermen, and there's fish people. There's the Ted Nugent crowd, right?
I love it.
I'm going to kill everything as mean as I can, and because I can, I got machine guns. And then there's the people who are like, yeah, I'm going to kill the things, but I'm going to be thoughtful and sensitive when I do it.
Yeah.
And it's that two. It's like macho
For sure.
and then there's like, let's be thoughtful about it. And the Ted Nugent crowd would, I catch a fish I don't like because I think it's bad for the environment. I'm going to throw it on the riverbank and let it die.
Yeah.
And those are those guys who I don't like, or the guys who feel like they need to catch their limit every time they fish.
Yes.
If the limit's 5 fish, I need to kill 5 things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the guys like me who I usually torture and release. That's usually my go-to. But once in a while, I will kill a fish, but I never keep a limit.
Right.
I don't feel a need to fill up my freezer.
Yeah.
Plus, fishing is easy. So why store fish? Just catch a fish when you want to eat it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I remember my friend of mine and I, when we were in Halifax, he came to visit me when I was at school, and we went out deep sea fishing. And, we're not fishermen by any means, recreationally or commercially. I learn about it, but I've done it very little in my life. And we go out and we're catching like fish. We're left, right, and center. But then he's like, oh, do you want to take all these home? And I'm like, no, what am I going to do with 10 fish? I can't, I don't even have the room for it. And they're like, right. Oh, he's like, well, people just bring it home. And I'm like, but I'm not going to eat it. What's the point? So I never took any home just because, and I gave them to other people because they wanted to take them home. But it was just weird, to say that, yeah, we're just going to catch as many as we can. If I were to do it again, I would catch maybe 1 or 2 and then just watch other people fish and do it that way. But that's just me personally, because I'm like, I'm not keeping these. I don't want to, I'll release them as fast as possible.
Well, it's funny. I hear that I go mackerel fishing on charter boats with a bunch of kids, and
nice.
You're catching 50, 60, 80 fish in an hour. There's so many mackerel out there. And the ship wants you to put them in these buckets, and then they sell them as bait later on.
Right.
But the kids and I are just catching them and shaking them off the hooks and letting them go. And like, what are you doing? Like, well, we're not going to eat them, and we don't want to kill them. So we're letting them.
I guess that's a revenue source for them, but it's like a bonus. But
we paid.
yeah, exactly. I mean, at least they make something of it if they do end up killing it. But
sure, I mean, they're only mackerel.
Yeah,
which by the way, if you're talking about sustainable eating, eat the freaking mackerel. They're delicious and they're sustainable. Yeah. So it goes back because they're selling them for bait to catch fish that aren't sustainable.
Right.
It's just the strangest.
For sure. Yeah. I'm working actually on a story for seafood fraud, which I'm going to have to get. Yeah, because there's apparently in Toronto and Ottawa, they did a study. Oceana did a study here, and they noticed that 48% of the fish that was bought was not the fish you thought you were buying.
Yeah, I've heard numbers like that, and it's not surprising. And the truth is most people don't even care.
But imagine though,
you do and I do.
Well, yeah, but imagine as a customer, you think you're buying red snapper, but it's tilapia.
Right, and
that's a big difference in price.
It is a big difference, and they're totally ripping people off.
Yeah,
but the truth is most North Americans don't even know the difference.
No.
And all they know is they don't want fish that tastes like fish. They want white, flaky stuff that tastes like whatever seasoning you put on it.
Yeah. And a lot of that's tilapia, because that's
or tilapia or any variation of scrod. It's any kind of white fish you can get.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so I'm working on the story, so I'll come back and talk about that.
I would love to have you back on for that.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, let's move forward. So you can read this article. If you're not already part of the Fish Nerds podcast group on Facebook, that's where most of the action is. Get there, be part of these conversations, and we'll include you in it. That's where this conversation happened, and I think 3 or 4 scientists chimed in on this one, and it became very interesting. I got accused of not taking it seriously, which is accurate. because I was making jokes while everyone else is talking serious science, because that's what I do when I'm defensive and don't speak science.
Oh, I love it.
So, all right. You want to talk about Louisiana? You just got back from Louisiana. I love Louisiana, and we have listeners in Louisiana, a lot of them.
That's awesome.
And I keep getting invited to go fishing, and I just have to get down there.
It's a fishing haven.
For the big fish down there, what's the big fish down there? The big game fish in Louisiana.
Like freshwater or saltwater?
So saltwater. It's in the marshes.
Ooh. That's a good question.
It's the red drum, the redfish.
Oh, the red fish.
Yeah, the redfish. That's the one that everyone is chasing.
Yeah.
They're delicious. They taste like white flaky fish.
Yeah, it's sold everywhere. It is sold everywhere.
Yeah.
Like when you ask for fish, it's usually redfish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went down there. Like I what's funny is I went down there recently in March for an ocean science communication, what we called an event. And it was a really cool thing that was surrounding it. One, it was cool because it was at this institute called LUMCON. It's the Louisiana University.
LUMCON?
LUMCON.
LUMCON. LUM.
LUMCON. So it stands for the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, and it's a marine institute, marine science institute that represents. It's owned by the state government, but it's partly owned by all the universities that are and colleges that are in Louisiana, and so it's interesting. We had there because that was my first job coming out of university. I went from Toronto to Louisiana, like southern Louisiana. Not knowing what I was getting myself into, and then living on a boat, basically in the Gulf of Mexico.
That's so cool.
8 months. It was still to this day, probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I mean, to go to bed in Louisiana and to wake up in like Key West or Panama City or Corpus Christi or anywhere,
Whenever you got to Panama City, did you sing? Did you sing David Lee Roth songs? Panama.
There was that joke that went around.
I would not be able to help myself, and I hate that song.
One thing that was interesting is I went into this is right after 9/11. This is 2002, and we went into a Marine base, like a Navy base in Mobile, Alabama, and the USS Cole was stored there after it got blown up, right? And it was blown up in the Caribbean. It got brought over. Now, I've never seen a battleship in person. These things are massive.
We used to play on them as kids, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and the hole in the USS Cole was just absolutely massive. So we're in there. We're about to pick up some reserve Navy SEALs, which these guys are badass, like unbelievable. And then researchers for the Navy and the Air Force.
Not so badass.
They're not. Well, they are badass because they've all been in the Army.
That's true. They're more badass than us. That's for sure.
Yeah, like one of the guys I was talking to, he was in the first Kuwait War, or in the first Iraq War. He was on the border of Kuwait and Iraq, and like can see the enemy right there. I was like, wow. But anyway, so we get in. We get into the harbor, and they come up on the radio. It's like, who is this? It's the RV Pelican. And they're like, do you have any foreigners on board? And they said no.
But you're a foreigner.
I was on the bridge. I was like, whoa. I'm Canadian. I'm considered foreign. And they're like, oh, that won't be a big deal. I'm like, you better radio in, because if they find out, I'm like, especially after everything that's happened, I do not want to get into trouble. And of course, they radio in. They're like, we're coming aboard. And they had these like little, I'm going to call them Zodiacs, but they were not Zodiacs. They were like crazy souped up Zodiacs with a massive machine gun on the front. And they came aboard and they questioned me for about an hour. I've never been so close to dirtying my pants.
Right. And you're like, I'm sorry. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I put on my best Canadian accent. Yeah. Like ally here.
Yeah. Just be as friendly as you can.
Well, the guy kept saying, you look nervous. I'm like, he had this big machine gun.
Like, of course I'm nervous.
I'm like, I've never seen a handgun, let alone a big machine gun in person before. The closest I've seen G.I. Joe. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, so everything ended up being fine. I went out, took a nap because I was so stressed out, and then everything went fine. But Louisiana was great, and living there. So going back there to LUMCON to do this event was amazing. And this event was put on by the executive director, Dr. Craig McLean, who owns DeepSeaNews.com. And he, in his fun fashion, he's like, I want you guys to come to LUMCON, come to Louisiana for this ocean science communication thing. And we're like, oh, great. What's it going to be about? I'm not going to tell you.
Oh,
Like,
but you're going to fly down here and get a
Yeah.
passport. Yeah.
He said, all you have to do is get yourself here. We'll pick you up from the airport. We'll take care of food. We'll take care of housing because there's dorm rooms and everything. Everything is going to be taken care of. We're like, okay,
Let's go. Yeah.
So we go down there and we have this big reveal and it ended up being, we're going to talk about the optimism surrounding Louisiana coastal loss, Southern Louisiana coastal loss. Now, if you look at the maps, and I should probably send you some of the maps. If you look at the maps, like comparing like 1932 Southern Louisiana to present day or 2011, which is the map that I have, it looks like they lost about 90% of their land. And that includes marshlands, that includes swamps, that includes lands. When we went down there, we did a bunch of videos, we did a bunch of products. I did a whole season for my podcast. It was the first season I did. I interviewed a number of different people, from politicians to fishers to scientists and all sorts of people to tribal people. It was amazing to get their different sort of level of optimism. Some had none, some had a lot. It was surrounding this coastal loss because people were losing their land. And especially when you look at the tribal communities losing their land, like it was just insane. But I'll go into that in a bit. But there are all these different projects going on. And we put out some really cool stuff that's slowly coming out. And I'll send you some links once I get them and stuff. But I was interviewing this guy Carl, who's a fisherman. He grew up in Louisiana. He's like a third or fourth generation fisherman, and he was saying that we were out in a bay. This Terrebonne Bay. We were out in a bay. There is no land surrounding us. It's all water, beautiful water, all water. He points over to the right and he says, "Out there is where my granddaddy used to take the horse and buggy and come out to the Barrier Islands."
And it's all gone. It's underwater.
Well, underwater. Like I'm talking about like 20, 30 feet of water. Gone. And I'm just like, you're joking. Like, it's not there. There's nothing there. And he's like, no, there's there. And we looked at the maps after, and it's like, sure enough, there was plenty of land to go all the way out to the Barrier Islands. The Barrier Islands used to be 30 to 40 feet high. And now they're gone, a lot of them. Right? Like, it's the change is unreal. And,
was that because they've ruined the habitats, got rid of the marshlands, filled in the swamps?
Yes. All of those. All of the above.
I'm not a scientist, and I know stuff.
Well, yeah, no, it is, and it's a combination of habitat degradation and coastal development, but it's also one of the biggest things was when they diverted the Mississippi River, right? So the Mississippi River used to empty right into that area, and so they were, the Mississippi obviously is a huge river, and it used to empty all the sediment into that area. So whatever got eroded away by the ocean.
We fill back in.
Replenish, with the sediment that comes in. Then they decided, no, we're going to take the Mississippi and we're going to put it through New Orleans because New Orleans is our big city. That's the one that's going to grow. And we want all the industry and all the transportation to go through New Orleans. So now all the sediment just goes out to the Gulf of Mexico and onto the shelf, right? And now produces one of the biggest hypoxia zones in the world.
All right, so for us non-science brains, hypoxia?
Hypoxia is basically an area at the bottom of the ocean that it has little to no oxygen. So think about the
dead zones.
Yeah, the dead zone. The bottom 1.5 meters. So that's what? Just over 3 feet. No, more than that. About 4.5 feet.
Sure.
That has no oxygen, basically dead.
Right.
And now this area differs in size, but it can stretch all the way out to Texas. That's how powerful the Mississippi plume is. And it can go all the way to the continental shelf. And each year it's different, and you can measure the different patterns. And so you have that aspect. So that's one thing. So you're not getting a replenishment of sediment. Then you have the habitat degradation from just development. You have oil and gas, which is a good and a bad thing down there. When I say good thing, it provides most of the jobs down there, right? Probably about 50, maybe even 60% of the jobs. So people rely on it, whether they work on the platforms or they work on the boats that supply the platforms or the helicopters that supply the platforms or the food that supply, all the accessory sort of industries that are built to.
And there's even fishing industries built around the oil platforms. Like fishing guides will go out there, and that's where the big fish, cobia and stuff like that are hanging out right around those kind of man-made reefs.
Absolutely, because the platforms become the habitat, because they're just basically that structure that allows fish to come in and hide and all that kind of stuff, and so it attracts bigger fish to eat. And they're actually quite beautiful habitats if you look at it from underneath. And the New Orleans Aquarium actually has a really cool habitat that has sort of like it's almost like an oil platform that's underneath, and it's really cool. So yeah,
do they every couple of years or so they just like crack the oil open and kill everything and go, see, all right, just light on fire and we start over again. And
I was waiting for that. That would be interesting. That would be interesting to have one entire tank. It would just saying every like 5 minutes an oil spill happens.
Right. And then the clams open up and the mussels and they just kind of slowly change it back.
Oh, man. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting tank. But yeah, I mean, so there's
it would be a money loser. No one would want to.
It would just depress everybody.
Yeah,
people would be like, "Oh God, I drove here. Oh,
I want my $42 back.
My $42 back. Screw this aquarium."
Yeah.
But yeah, so the oil and gas of the bad thing, what they do, obviously, other than the pollution that they cause, but what they do is they cut canals into the swamps and into the marshlands to get out faster. And as the land changes, their canals change, so they continue to cut. And there's an environmental aspect to this, like a bad aspect. And there's also a cultural aspect, because when we went out there, Lumcon, the staff were great because they gave us access to all these different people. And one of the benefits that we had was the Portachet tribal community decided to invite all like 45 of us out there and gave us a huge meal, like and just spoiled us rotten, and it was amazing. But they talked about how they are in legal battles with the oil and gas companies all the time, because when they cut these canals, they start to cut through cultural land, right? And they start to cut through like grave sites or like cultural, like archaeological important sites. And so they're in, and then what happens is the oil and gas companies sue them back, saying we're should be treated as humans too, and you're infringing on our rights to use this land, even though it's like a land that used to be part of the tribal community. So anyway, so this is another cause of this loss of land. And then of course you have sea level rise, which isn't helping anything. When sea level comes in and encroaches on marshlands, it basically just degrades the marshland slowly. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing all this combination of cumulative impacts, and we're basically, Southern Louisiana has to build levee systems to put them in, but the state can't afford the levee systems.
Right, and that's why when we had the big hurricanes, that's why the floods came in. It's because the natural barriers weren't in place anymore, and the levees failed, and entire wards became 20 feet underwater.
Yep, and of course, the levees, which are expensive to maintain, weren't maintained properly. So a lot of them broke. We keep always hearing levees, or the levees broke, and it flooded most of New Orleans, most of Southern Louisiana. And it was a terrible, terrible situation. And what was interesting too is to get, like, everybody's like, oh, we got to build levees in Southern Louisiana, but the state didn't have the money. So what did they do? They actually voted. The community voted to increase the sales tax to pay for the levies. When was the last time people voted to increase a tax? That's unheard of. So
I got to tell you, I live in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And we have no sales tax, no income tax. So we vote no on taxes most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, which is not always good, but
no, I hear you.
So it's very rare, but I think that's when people really see that value. They see like, oh, shit, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
we got to pay for this stuff.
They're losing their land, and the Portachet tribe has lost 80% of their land.
Yeah, well, it's not. You said slow. It's not slow. This is going fast.
It's going fast.
Yeah.
I mean, all the thing that always got me was, we keep hearing the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They're always predicting sea level rise to go up, and by 2050 you're going to have 2 millimeters or 5 millimeters or 10 millimeters, depending where you are, increase in sea level rise. And everybody's like, well, let's worry about that when we get there.
Right, this is too late. Yeah,
this is happening.
Well, people don't understand what that incremental change means. If you're talking about water temperatures rising, when you talk about global warming, 1 or 2 degrees can wreck entire populations of fish, right?
Yeah.
1 or 2 inches of increase in sea level can wreck entire sections of these bayous or these swamp areas. Like it means something. And people, they think 2 inches is no big deal or 2 degrees is no big deal, but it's kind of a big deal.
Well, it's not only a big deal just on its own, but when you look at the habitat degradation and the alteration of the coast, that makes it even worse. And I think that's what people don't realize is the constant change in our coastline, whether it be natural erosion or human caused developmental changes. We're going to be seeing a lot more of a change a lot faster. And I think that's what we're starting to realize, especially with this example of Southern Louisiana.
Yeah, I think you're right. And by the way, thank you for making the show depressing. I appreciate that. Really makes it a lot more fun.
I can go more depressing.
I know you can.
But see, now talk about this. So yes, it's a depressing situation. And our task for this ocean science communication thing was to look for the optimism. And so that's what we did. We found optimism, and the optimism was in the people. Because they refuse to leave. Like, we're not leaving here. People are moving there because of the culture of Southern Louisiana. And so they are hellbound to figure out a way.
The culture of Southern, they like beads and boobs? Like, what is the culture? No, what am I missing? I've been there.
No. No, it's not New Orleans. New Orleans is completely
not Bourbon Street culture.
No, not at all. Not at all. You go in, you get a variety of different cultures. You get the Acadian culture, you get the tribal culture, you get the Cajun culture, and it's swooped up into just great people who love to live off the land, love to fish. Love their recreational and commercial
food. The food.
Food is fantastic. And the thing is, like, that's the one thing that we were told, like, when we go to the sort of tribal dinner was, look, like, food is culture to them. That's like, if you're polite, you will eat everything they give you, and so that's not a problem for me. I eat everything anyway. But that's what they were basically saying. And just that, the people are resilient. They've been living there for years, and they keep changing and they keep adapting. But now we're getting into times where people are having to move. And that's what happened to one of the tribal areas where they built the levee system, but they didn't have enough money to build it all the way to there, or the politics got involved. So now they have to move. They're on an island. They have to move. And they're moving like on a suburb to New Orleans. They're moving from like the country, which is beautiful, quiet, very nature bound. And then now they're living just outside of or they're going to be moving just outside of New Orleans in like a housing project. Like, imagine that. Like, that's sort of what we're looking at for the future in a lot of these coastal areas, especially when you're looking at like marshlands and swamplands and stuff like that. But there is optimism. Like, these people are like, no, we're not leaving. We're going to figure out a way to change. We're going to build more levee systems. We're going to make sure that we start restoring our marshlands. They're putting in now black mangroves, which apparently were native to Louisiana a while ago. There's just not a lot of them, but now they're starting to think about actually planting more because they just seem to be a little bit more resilient in these types of situations. They're putting in more rules in terms of cutting canals and whatnot. So you're seeing changes slowly. But now they're starting to quicken the pace a little.
Well, they have to.
They have to, yeah. And that's the other thing. It's just now that's like it's a must. It's not just are we going to debate? They're not even, the climate change doesn't even come up in conversations. It's just like, let's just adapt. Like, let's just figure this out.
Right. They don't care what you call it.
They don't care what you call it. They're not debating whether it's happening or not. It's happened. All this stuff has happened. They're not blaming anybody. They're not angry too much. They're just saying, how do we do that? Oh, there's anger. There's a lot of anger, but there's still a lot of hope, and there's still a lot of optimism in that. And that was the beauty of doing this project, was to come up like, so one of the projects that somebody did, they just released it actually, it's called Bayou Women, is to highlight the women who are sort of taking a leadership role in the Bayou to adapt to these areas. There's a lot of politicians who are women who are really leading the way in terms of building these levee systems and making sure that the people are safe and all this kind of stuff. And it's a really cool kind of area to be in. It's very dynamic, very resilient, and some of them refer to themselves as really stubborn. We're just not moving. So we got to figure out a way to live here.
Well, that just makes them very American because we're all very stubborn. I'm not leaving. You got to pry this bayou from my cold, dead hands.
Yeah,
I'm not going anywhere. So
yeah, it's really interesting to see, and of course, like the fishing is different there too. Commercial fishing. A lot of the Louisianan-born fishermen are actually quitting shrimping because all the imports from the Asian countries are a lot cheaper, and people are going for that. So they're not buying. Unless you go directly to the fisher, you cannot get Gulf of Mexico shrimp for cheap anymore because it's just too expensive.
Well, it's like that everywhere too. Like in New England, lobster's getting expensive, and it's caught, right there. And I don't know. It's always strange when you see like local foods cost more locally than they do if you're halfway across the country.
It's crazy. So. Like locally, organically raised, non-medical food, is more expensive than it is to buy sort of factory farm food or whatever it is. It's insane. But you have chickens.
I do. I was just thinking about chickens. I raised my own chickens. The other day I was saying I'm not going to do meat birds this year, and it costs. I did the math on it. I think it was like $40 a bird. It cost to raise my chickens to eating size.
Okay.
And I was in a grocery store the other day, an organic grocery store, and their meat birds were $35 a bird. So they had it priced about right, for volume. But I still couldn't. I can never buy it. I'm $6 at the supermarket to buy a cooked bird.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my math is. I'm like, well, of course, I'll buy the factory bird because
that's the thing. Right? It's way more expensive to buy good for you bird than it is for bad for you bird.
Yeah, but we do chickens, and we love our chickens.
I keep seeing. I follow the stories. I'm like, what's chicken number one up to? What are they?
I am on the cusp. I've been toying with starting a chicken podcast. That's how much I love chickens.
You should. You and Rhett Talbot should do chickens and ducks.
That'd be the worst podcast ever.
Because Rhett's the same one. I follow it every time.
Yeah.
He's like, coffee with ducks this morning. And I'm like, cool, ducks.
Yeah. So Rhett Talbot is the host of the Beyond Data podcast for people who want to keep up. It's great. He was on our show last week. He did a whole deep, he's like a real news guy.
Yeah. He's a journal. Like he is the authentic, classic, I'm going to look at both sides of the story type journalist, where you and I were just we just talk about the news.
Right. So he says to me, "Hey Clay, can I make a news story for you?" I'm like, "Yes." Yeah. And then so last week is this 15-minute hard hitting investigative journalist news story about Char, and I'm like, I'm putting it on mixing it on my show, and I'm like, this is the only content I've ever put on my show that's real news. And it doesn't belong on my show. It's so good, it's beyond what my show is.
I'm surprised you didn't edit in some jokes halfway through.
I had to work hard just to put it out there. And let it ride on its own merit. And I want more of it. So I'm like,
for sure. I mean, Rhett's Rhett provides always great information. He's been on my show as well, and I listen to Beyond Date all the time, and it's amazing. The amount of work. He doesn't put out podcasts often, but when he does, they're gold.
Well, he's such a good writer, and that it really comes through, and you can tell he's trained journalist, so he's not going to put out crap. I mean, his first episode was NPR. It was NPR quality stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Whereas the rest of us, our first episode's garbage.
Oh,
his first episode.
My episode 462 was garbage compared to his.
Man, it's
it's insane. There's definitely a different quality in terms of what he puts out, and it's just a different style, but it's an amazing, entertaining style, right? So
totally. Hey, speaking of that, let's before we do the news.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about Patreon, which is how our podcast is funded. You're also on Patreon for Speak Up for Blue, aren't you?
That's right.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Patreon is basically a Kickstarter style funding for ongoing art projects, right? So if you do a weekly podcast like I do, or a 3-day a week like Andrew does, 3-day makes you crazy, by the way. the you want to get paid for doing the work. And listeners who like our show, we're asking everyone to donate $1 per episode to help keep our show going. That's $4 a month. Means nothing to most people, but multiply that over our tens of listeners, and we're making some real bank here. And so if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/fishnerds, patreon.com/fishnerds, and click on the donate now button, and you can give us $1 an episode, $4 a month, and it makes a big difference. If every listener did that, Andrew, I did the math on this the other day.
Yeah.
If all my listeners would do that, $1 an episode, $4 a month, not only could I quit my job, but I could send my kids to college someday.
That's amazing.
So if my kids don't go to college, it's our listeners' fault for not giving me $1. So you bastards.
How dare you?
Listeners. How dare you not give me $1?
So loyal, but they don't want to see your kids.
Oh, take. What about my kids? My kids are going to be dumb because of you.
You should put like a picture on the Patreon of your kids like doing
with a dunce cap.
Yeah. I love it. Like, we can't go to college because of you.
Hey, speaking of smart people, we have 3 new patrons this month.
Ooh, there we go.
I know. I want to Courtney D from Louisiana. I want to thank her for some money.
There we go.
Anthony DiPolito. I don't know where he's from, but he gave us money. And Arcelia Vines gave us money. She actually lives in my town, and I see her at the Cumberland Farms where she works every week. And it's so weird to bump into people who listen to your show.
Isn't it crazy?
Because they know you better than you know you. Like,
yeah. They can recognize you by your voice.
Man, it's so weird. It's so weird. And we walk in and my daughter goes, "Dad, I think you're famous," because she knew who you were. I'm like, I know. It's so wacky.
Your daddy is famous.
But really cool. If you give us $5 an episode, we're going to give you a Fish Nerds hat. At $25, you can be a Fish Nerds show sponsor. That's our sponsorship level. You don't get a full commercial, but we'll mention your website on the show. And our friend Josh Lopes at lopestax.com pays us that much money. And so I just said lopestax.com. I made $25. and we appreciate it. And actually, he's gotten customers from just that little bit of money. Awesome. And it's $100 a month. That's a lot of money for most people. But if you're a huge business tycoon like Josh Lopes at lopestax.com, you can afford it.
Yep.
But if you can't afford that, you can afford $1 an episode. Just skip Starbucks for one day.
As I was just about to say.
One day.
That's cheaper than a Starbucks coffee.
And way more fun. All right. So that's patreon.com/fishnerds. Give us a freaking $1. Save my kids from being dumb. And we all win. All right, Andrew. How about some fish in the news?
Let's do it.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
All right, you're supposed to say, "I love fish in the news."
I love fish in the news.
All right, and everyone loves fish in the news.
I love fish. So that's my job. It's fish in the news.
I know. Special thanks to Diana's Bath Salts for our fish in the news music. Hope you enjoyed that.
I did.
All right, and Andrew, you picked the stories this week.
I did. It was kind of funny because I was like, "Ooh, there's some really great stories that have to do with fish and oceans and stuff." So I was like, maybe I'll put on you because you say, "Hey, add any notes that you want." So I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to take over this show and I'm going to put all the stories that I like to."
Why not? I'm burned out. I'm 197 episodes deep.
There you go.
I'm 5 years in. I don't have any ideas anymore. I'm done.
I'm gonna put a pitch. If people want to have a podcast and they want me to do the show notes, I will do the show notes. I will prepare a great podcast for you with great stories. That's what I do. So when I heard,
what do you call a wine guy at a restaurant? The Seminole. You're like the news Seminole.
There, yeah.
I'm saying it wrong. I know I'm saying it wrong.
Probably, but it sounds good to me because I don't know what it's called. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I'll take it for it. All right, so the first story you brought me is from Bloomberg Business Week. So all you business people out there, this is for you. The fighting has begun over who owns land drowned by climate change. Mm-hmm. America's coastal cities are preparing for legal battles over real estate that slips into the ocean. This goes back to our Louisiana talk a few minutes
exactly. Ago. Look at this. It's all related. See, this is how good I am. This is how good I am at planning a show.
So on April morning in 2016, Daryl Carpenter, a charter boat captain out of Grand Isle, Louisiana, took some clients to catch redfish on a marsh pond that didn't used to exist. Coastal erosion and rising seas are submerging a football field with Louisiana land every hour. Is that true? Every hour?
Mm-hmm.
Is there enough land where you can lose that much an hour?
It depends on like how the winds are coming, but yeah.
Yeah. So what happened, I mean, I read the story already. What happened is he was out there fishing. A boat pulls up next to him and says, "Hey, buddy, you're trespassing." And then that person called the sheriff's office, who then arrested Carpenter for trespassing on the property. And that goes into the question, if property is underwater, is it property? That's
exactly. If you owned it at one point, is it property? And just name the people who own the property. The Castex Energy, an energy company, an oil and gas company, owned the property. And that's what makes it interesting. Remember I talked about the oil and gas, how it's a good and a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll be happy to cut up a canal near a tribal land just to get out fast. But God forbid, you know, a guy trying to make money by doing guiding, you know, bringing out a couple of clients on a new area to fish because it's overtaken by water.
Doing no real harm.
Doing no real harm.
Well, except to the fish, which he's torturing.
Apparently he's torturing some fish. Clients are torturing some fish. But under Louisiana state law, that anything that was taken over by water permanently, that was previously unnavigable swampland, is fine. It is public property. And so this sheriff, probably under the influence of this oil company, I'm going to guess, arrested Carpenter, and Carpenter sued the sheriff's office and Castex Energy because he's like, look, like this is ridiculous. You know?
He lost.
And he lost.
He lost. Yeah, because they had better lawyers.
They had better lawyers.
It comes down to money, right? It
does.
Has the most amount of money. Now, most states in the United States have water rights rules where you can't own water.
Exactly.
And New Hampshire, for example, is a good example of that. You can, any body of water, if you're in the water, you are not trespassing.
Right.
And that's the same laws in Louisiana.
Exactly.
But they're saying, I owned it before it got flooded, therefore it's mine.
Exactly. And now what's interesting too is how is this going to affect people who own land, like individual landowners, right? Where they you know spent, let's say, 100 to 200,000, maybe 300,000, maybe $1 million on their property, and then it gets taken over by water, and then you have oil companies who are going to use that as canal systems. But you don't want oil companies to like bring their supply boats and everything out in front of your house,
right?
Now in water because it's on stilts, or it's just above water, you know. So you lose all that land, you lose all that property. Are you going to get paid out for it? Is the government going to reimburse you because it didn't do a good enough job to hold out the water, or natural causes just kind of come in and take over? Like, this is a big problem that people don't really think about when we talk about, you know, this type of flooding and losing land.
Well, I think the fact that the oil company, the power company won that sets a dangerous precedent too, because it's really scary. And my prediction is always going to be, if you have a lot of money, you're going to get what you want. And if you're working hard and have no money, but you're working really hard, you're screwed.
Yep.
And that's the reality of this whole thing.
It is, and that's the shame, and that's again a disadvantage of when you have oil companies working in your area and you rely so much on them. But this is going to be a big legal problem. That's not just going to be isolated in Louisiana or this case. This is going to have a lot of repercussions throughout the country and North America.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how it comes out in the future. And I wouldn't be shocked to see the laws change.
I agree.
You know, I mean, let's say you are a rich person, perhaps a president of some sort, and you own a lot of golf courses, say on islands.
Yeah. And
you start noticing you're losing your land, and people are able to go fishing on it or do other things on it. Mm-hmm. Maybe you leverage your power to change the rules so that water now becomes part of your property, and you've just changed it over, and now anyone has to pay you to access that section of water.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked.
I wouldn't be shocked. I would not also be shocked to see a state get exempt from having oil and gas lease plots being sold in said state because it will ruin the view of specific hotels that are owned by powerful rich people.
Like presidents?
Potentially.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. Well, I guess they don't
Hypothetically
know.
speaking.
Yeah, I guess they're kind of away from it now, but probably after their presidency is over, they'll probably get the money that they've made. And so, yeah, one state will get exempt and not the others because the view is not as nice, I guess. So yeah, I find that interesting as well.
Yeah, it'll be. Well, we'll follow up and we'll see how it comes out. All those, we won't. I don't know.
In 4 years.
Yeah, in 4 more years. Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna be disappointed in a couple of years. All right. So next story. This is from ABC News. Again, another
Australia. This is Australian news, not American.
Right. ABC News. Great Barrier Reef to get $500 million to tackle pollution and breed more resilient coral. Good. I was getting really tired of wussy coral, so I'm so glad that they are going to breed the resilient kind. You know, like, good day. What kind of coral should we grow? Have you thought about resilient coral?
Yeah.
I haven't. Sorry.
You just see, like, we want the tough coral. We want the coral that can stand through anything because we are ruining our oceans. So we want the toughest coral. I just find it interesting. So one, you know, when you see that title, breed more resilient coral, that's really interesting. I don't know if we've ever done that before.
Right.
I just find that sentence, that phrase, breed more resilient coral. You don't breed more resilient coral. You add phytoplankton that lives in the coral that are more tolerant to higher temperatures. You add more of those in, and I don't even know if you can do that to all the corals. I don't see that really being possible. Maybe in a laboratory, but not in the open ocean. And such a, like, I don't think people realize how big the Great Barrier Reef is. It basically stretches from Vancouver down to the bottom of California. Right, so that's a pretty big area.
We're talking about 6,000 miles, something ridiculous. Yeah. And so, you know, just saying, oh yeah, we're going to put 500 million to do that. That's not even going to be close to covering it. That'll cover like a small area, not even close to even a third of that area. Now, the tackle pollution, I think that's really interesting because the one thing that has plagued the Great Barrier Reef, especially the area of the Great Barrier Reef that is close to the coast. So we got to remember, Barrier Reef is actually along the continental shelf. It's right before the continental shelf dips off, so it's away from the coast. But there are some corals and coral reef systems that are close to the coast. And Australia, over the past, I'm going to say 2 decades, maybe even more, has just gone through a boom of development along that coastline. And so you get a lot of nutrients that are deposited just because of more people, more waste. You get a lot of sedimentation, coastal development, coastal alteration. Sediment is not taken care of properly, so you get sediment that comes over the corals, smothers the corals. It stops it from getting the sunlight that it needs to, that the phytoplankton need to convert to, so the coral skeleton can build a skeleton. And so you're getting a lot of chronic problems. And for years, for decades, scientists have been saying we need to tackle this. We need to tackle this water quality issue. And now they decide to do it once a third of the coral reef is dead. But at least they're making tougher coral. So, like, why don't we look at, like, can we look at, like, any kind of endangered animal and just breed a tougher version of them?
Well, yeah, just inject.
Why don't you just, hey, panda, toughen up?
Yeah, just inject the Hulk gene into it.
Exactly. Right? That's what I hear. I'm like, we can make tougher. You know?
Disney's going to make them tougher. I'll tell you that. Just because they've got the Hulk right, so they're going to look over the genes for that.
They do have the Hulk right. I by the way, I saw the Avengers.
Oh, don't tell me.
No spoilers here. No, Fish Nerds will not spoil it, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to love every second of it.
Oh, I can't wait. I take my daughter now to see it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, so getting back to that, I just find it interesting because the Australian government is a very conservative government, and now they're trying to save the coral reef because now you got to remember the Great Barrier Reef. brings in $6 billion into the economy.
We get the fisheries, the tourism, there's so many.
snorkeling, scuba diving, boating, like just it's insane. And because it takes up such a large area, it's just good for the entire coastline and the entire country. So now they have to save it, but this is also the same government that allowed and approved dumping of coal mining waste into the Great Barrier Reef as these ships were going through. They also allowed, or I don't know if it's actually been built, they're allowing a new port to be built, a new pier to be built to accommodate these massive ships that are going to take this coal mining stuff up in the northeastern Australia. And so it's also the same government and then it's like, oh no, we'll just throw money at it and we're going to save the whole thing because a third of it's dead. We'll fix it. Don't worry. They're also going to fight, they're putting in money to fight invasive crown of thorns starfish. This is a starfish that eats coral. When you have one or two of them in the Barrier Reef, it's not a big deal. It happens, it's part of nature. But every once in a while, you get hundreds of thousands that cover small pieces of reef and literally eat the whole thing.
Right. What I would do is chop them all up and throw them back in the ocean.
That's what yeah.
I'm going to just cut them up.
Just cut them up. Just rip their arms off. They'll never be able to handle that.
Nothing they can do.
No. Just to be all explanation. I'm going to explain that because they regrow their arms and they want that to happen.
Yeah, you have clones happening there.
Yeah, you'd have a lot of clones happening. So they think they can throw money at it and they can literally just pick them off. That's their way of getting them off because you can't put chemicals in because you're going to kill the reefs. The reefs are very sensitive to any kind of water quality change. But now that you're going to breed,
you need to find a way to add value to those stars. So if there was like a collectible, like if they became the new Beanie Babies,
I'll tell you, you know what? It's possible because I'll tell you, these things are kind of cool looking. They're
beautiful.
There's the red one, crown of thorns, and then what they call it in the aquarium industry, the chocolate chip starfish.
The most delicious of all.
It is. It's tasty. Yeah. Don't eat it. It's Australia. I don't know what can kill you in Australia.
Everything will kill you. That's why I'm never going there. Screw that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, so that's what's happening in Australia. The government decides I'm going to throw $500 million at this thing that decides that brings in $6 billion, and I think it's going to be okay. Now, I'm not complaining here. $500 million for any kind of environmental entity is a very good thing, but it's not going to fix the Great Barrier Reef the way we think it's going to fix the Great Barrier Reef. So, it's a big problem. There's some articles that say that it could lose $1 billion in tourism money and whatnot. So, let's maybe throw in some more money at it. Let's not approve things that can cause worse things to happen to corals in the Great Barrier Reef, and let's get back onto task and let's protect one of your big industries.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I like about this story. I like what it shows me when you look at this, like government getting involved, throwing money at stuff, and not always making sense. And this is Australia, who we look at as like the greatest people ever, or I like it's an equalizer. It shows that all governments potentially can do dumb stuff. So you feel okay, well, that's all right. We're not the only ones with dumb government. Other people have dumb government too.
I feel like all governments are dumb.
They are, but
dumb decisions. Right?
Yeah.
Some more than others.
Some and variability within like different time frames.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I just find this government, they're a very conservative government from what I know. They're very into fossil fuels. I'm not sure if this is familiar to you at all.
No, I don't know anything. I know that the toilet's flushed in the wrong direction. That's all I know.
Yeah, denying climate change and all that stuff.
I'm shocked that people are still denying climate change.
Yeah,
I find that so surprising, and they're the flat Earth people. Like they're just the same.
Yeah, they are. It is true, and they come up with everything. That like the new one that I love is people breathe out carbon dioxide.
True story. That's actually true.
And that's causing us now. Overpopulation is causing climate change.
Well, that's the whole premise of the Avengers Infinity Wars. That's it. That's the movie. They have the answer.
You just spoiled it.
That's the plot.
Now I can't go watch it.
Yeah, forget it. That's all I'm giving away.
Your millions of listeners have just cost Disney so many millions of dollars.
At what point can we start talking about things?
In movies?
Yeah.
I say, depending on the size, depending on the strength of the movie and how and how many people watch it. I think like for Avengers, I would say after in public, I would say after 3 to 4 weeks.
In public?
Yeah.
Keep your pants on. We're not talking about it yet.
You can't.
Give it a month.
You can't say it in a coffee shop. You have to whisper or maybe even write it down. Or
I've not seen one spoiler anywhere on this.
No.
And it's shocking because everyone's already seen it because it's the biggest movie ever.
I do know something happens, big things happen. And I know I'm not going to say it.
Well, you could read the comic books. I mean, the storyline exists already. You're not making anything new up.
But it's like Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Before season 6. Was it 6? Yeah. Everybody knew what was going to happen. But I didn't read the book, so I didn't know what was going to happen.
There's a book.
And people are like, well, didn't you read the book? I'm like, no, I didn't read the book. If I read the book, I wouldn't watch the show.
I would.
Why would I do that? Because it always ruins it. But yeah, no, I genuinely hate spoilers, and I don't listen to anything. I think the only time it is hard to avoid spoilers is when you're watching a sporting event that night and you're PVRing it, and then you because you're doing something else, and then you go home and you try and watch the entire game, and the whole time you turn the radio off so you don't hear the score, you turn your phone off so nobody texts it to you, and then when you get home, one of your kids who never watched sports decides to tell you all of a sudden they found out what the score is, and they tell you what the score is. It's never happened to me before, and I'm not bitter.
You're very specific.
But
I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I don't watch sports, so I don't know about that. All right, we have to move and wrap this show up.
So that's it. You've listened to a bunch of fish nerds when you should have been fishing.
We'd like to thank our families for supporting us while we podcast, go on fishing quests, and do all the silly things that nerds do. And make no bones about it, Andrew, you are a nerd. We're happy to have you. Special thanks to you. And you can find Andrew's podcast at speakupforblue.com.
That's right.
And, of course, we'll put links at fishnerds.com. Really appreciate you coming on the show, helping us co-host this week, bring us some real conservation talk, which we desperately need more of on this show. And so we appreciate it. So
I love doing it. So until next time, follow the code of Fish Nerds.
Spawn early and often.
Avoid free lunches with strings attached.
And swim against the current every chance you get. Done. Made a podcast.
That's awesome. I like these last little things. It's so funny. I avoid free lunches with strings attached.
You've been using it for so many episodes, and I still have not memorized them.
I know.
So.
You know what's funny?